Welcome into the Kings Beat podcast. I'm James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320, the Kings Beat. We are, of course, a Blue Wire podcast, and we will have some sponsors coming up here in the near future with the season about to start. But for right now, it's just me and, of course, Box 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
I'm fantastic. We have Kings basketball to talk about. We've seen them in action. We've seen them in training camp. We have storylines. We have movies to talk about, I suppose. We've got there's all kinds of stuff going on.
We got
And
all
the
kinds
weather
of
is
stuff.
amazing outside.
See, Sean, you're the one who's going to sidetrack us here. You're going to sidetrack us and make this podcast longer than it probably should be. Of course, we are joined by Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
Doing well. No complaints. Like Sean, happy that there's actually some things going on to talk about, and we don't have to, go off about what people are saying on random podcasts and stuff. We got content now, guys.
Content. We talk about content. Okay, we are doing a live show, so I'm going to tweet out what Brenden already tweeted out. We already have a couple of people popping in here to join us. Welcome in, Chris Malott. Very nice to see that we at least have one person who's talking in the chat. It will get busier in here as we move through the show. We are in day 5 of NBA training camp, and now training camp's over. So now we get to preseason, and the Kings are taking tomorrow off. Like, it's been an eventful camp, sort of. I don't know. Is it just me, or does the presence of DeMar DeRozan just like turn up the volume of like who this team is right now?
DeMar DeRozan is religion for the Kings. Like, not even just players, coaches, staffers, front office, ownership. Like, his presence alone gives them all something to believe in. And that's like really faith. That's like religion for this team. And that's what I keep calling DeMar DeRozan, because he literally is walking embodiment of belief that this team is capable of doing something and being a relevant team in the Western Conference, and a very crowded Western Conference. So seeing him on the court, even for the first few moments that we had of training camp this past week, 7 practices in all, 3 or 4 days of 2-a-days, just really exciting. And it's not exciting. It's exciting for that team. It's exciting. You've seen certainly the fervor on social media and what fans are anticipating and looking forward to, but you can sense it within the media too, that there's a different gear that this team is at right now. And it's exciting for them.
That's some heavy shit to follow there, Brenden.
I don't have any religion speeches here, but I think the
religion.
I think the belief aspect is what I'll just kind of echo. I think it's Mike Brown that said it earlier this week as well, is just the level of belief that it gives this team, as my microphone decides to hate me, that they have a lot of talent, that obviously what DeMar has been throughout his career. De'Aaron Fox said today that he feels like everybody has a chip on their shoulder, coaching staff on down, from not making the postseason last year, and that DeRozan falls under the same category, not making it with Chicago last year, or playoffs, if we want to count play-in as postseason and be specific with that terminology. But I think it is a belief thing. It's that you have this guy suited up next to you, and there's a lot of talent on this team. So I think that makes a big difference in how far everybody on that squad thinks they can go.
We're talking basketball Jesus here on the Kings Beat podcast. Welcome in to everybody who's flooding in. We are doing a live show. Hello, Miss Macklos. Hello, West Sac Kings fan. Jeff the Lefty, we just started. BP Butler, Secure Bagley, all you guys. Thanks for joining us here on a Saturday. We did just get done with practice, and let's just touch base on a couple of things. Number one, welcome into the show. If you're watching here on YouTube and you don't mind, subscribe to the channel so you get an instant notification when we go live. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button. That helps us, and it actually like it's everyone going. Oh my gosh, we've got Lorraine Fox in here. What's going on? Tyler Jennings is here. What's going on, everybody? Awesome. So I think it's like we're entering like what should be like the most exciting time of the year. We do have a little bit of bummer news to report. While I was on my way home from practice and these guys were on their way back to their places, the Kings did announce that Orlando Robinson has sprained his MCL in his left knee. He's going to be reevaluated in a month. I did see here in the chat that there are some folks chatting about the fact that he does have a $500,000 guarantee. Whether that means he makes the team or not, I have no idea. We're going to have to wait and see. But I definitely think that this is it's kind of an unfortunate injury for Orlando, because the Kings actually have a bunch of young players who are biting, chomping at the bit, or the bits, as Mike calls it, Mike Brown, chomping at the bits here to try to make this team. And it's kind of a bummer. Have you guys, like, we just saw the news like not too long ago, any time to digest what that could mean for this team?
I mean, I think it's unfortunate. Obviously, it kind of, to me, is just like, oh gosh, another one, with Devin Carter obviously being the most extended absence that'll take place this year. Of the current injuries, we have Kevin Huerter working his way back, Jordan McLaughlin, Trey Lyles, all of these guys like not participating in the 5-on-5 drills or like the scrimmages that we saw today. And a lot of them, most to be expected, including Orlando now, won't be available for preseason. And so I think that, you like to be able to obviously see these guys get reps and how they could function within all of this before it's as meaningful as it gets in the regular season is here. So I still thought Alex Len would be that backup center spot over Orlando. And so I don't imagine that this would change that much for him, but having 5 different guys out now for the remainder of training camp and potentially a little bit into preseason, varying based on who we're talking about, is definitely unfortunate and not what you want to see at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, Sean, there's something here. I'm going to touch base with you on this one. Like, we're watching the Kings go out, and we got to see a little bit of scrimmage this week. We got to see a little bit today. I think you guys were there on Thursday when they actually opened the gym and they were actually running up and down the court. But I kind of feel for everybody involved here, because Malik Monk a little bit slow to return to form, because he wasn't allowed to basically do contact all summer long. He wasn't allowed to play basketball. He certainly was allowed to work out and shoot the ball and all that stuff. But because of his knee injury at the end of last season, the Kings kind of took a slow approach to him this offseason. So when we're watching this team go out and play, sometimes Monk is on the court and sometimes Alex Len is on the court, but it's not even like, it's not the B team, and a lot of times it's not the C team. It's even like part of the C and part of the D team that we're seeing go up against the starters. Is that a concern at all for you guys? Sean, is that a concern for you that, we always hear this, iron sharpens iron, and last year De'Aaron Fox is going to camp and he's fighting it out against Davion Mitchell every day at camp, and Kevin Huerter is going up against Ellis, but also Chris Duarte. And this season, it's almost like, because of the group of injuries, there isn't even a true like practice squad that they're going up against, or a second team that they're going up against in camp.
No, I mean, that's depth. I mean, that's your roster, and you've got a ton of guys that can't go through contact right now. So it just kind of is what it is. It sucks, but at the same time, you're fortunate that you don't have really anything that's terribly long term, as Brenden kind of laid out. Devin Carter is the one guy that you have as a do not open until January type of package for him for his rookie season. But this is what provides opportunity, and I think it's moments like this, little stuff that happens in the summer, that has let people see the growth of somebody like Keon Ellis. There's a lot of times guys tend to get flushed out because of opportunity not opening up for them. And, the Kings are going to be able to kick some tires on some guys and see what's what. And ultimately, yes, a lot of these players that are out right now have the trust and the experience to go along with what ultimately you're going to see compete during the regular season, and Mike Brown has the faith in those guys. So, but if he can get swayed in any way, shape, or form, or opportunity is there for the taking, not only for maybe this team, but even some other teams, that's all you can ask for if you're one of these guys that are so buried in the rotation and buried in the roster. Someone like Mason Jones, like really like getting ample opportunity to be able to play a point guard role, because of the fact that Jordan McLaughlin and, as you mentioned, Malik still a little bit getting into form. This gets him kind of a real big boost, and maybe a decision the Kings might have to make as to whether or not to keep him as a two-way, maybe juggle somebody else into a two-way spot, and maybe see Mason make the final roster. But this is what training camp looks like. This is what it is for every professional sports team, even college sports team. Is you have to be able to tackle your opportunity when it's presented, and these are a lot of opportunities that are presented. And I think, James, you and I kind of focused, not today so much, but the last 2 days, of really what some of the back end possibilities look like. And I took more of an approach on the back end bigs, and really kind of seeing this injury to Orlando Robinson is going to provide opportunity there. And someone like Skal Labissière might be able to make an impact and find his way onto this team in the early going. So certainly you want to see what this team looks like in action when preseason rolls around. Tips off on Wednesday. And it is crazy to me to see that, training camps opened up Friday, a week from Friday for some teams who had to go overseas. But boy, you've already got preseason games 5 days into camp for some. Crazy to me. But I think the Kings have a real luxury of having really over a week to have a training camp, several practices, a day off before they get their first preseason test.
Yeah. I think it goes both ways. Like, you would rather have these guys out there, obviously. I think specifically like Jordan and Orlando, the new guys, you kind of know what you have with Kevin and Trey, and Devin TBD as well, obviously a rookie. But I think seeing those new guys mixed in would have been helpful. But like Sean's saying, you get more opportunity to see the guys that you really have to debate. Are they going to be sticking around? Big part of this is you're cutting down the 21 you're bringing into training camp to eventually 18 when the regular season comes around. And it seems like the 4 questions from my perspective are Boogie Ellis, Terry Taylor, Skal Labissière, and Broderick Thomas. And it's like, which one of these guys could get that last spot? As Sean mentioned, could there be some movement with a two-way to work some of these guys in and things like that? But Thursday's practice, we saw typical starting 5 of De'Aaron Fox, Keon Ellis, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. Gray pennies, typically second team, was Mason Jones, Isaac Jones, Jalen McDaniels, Isaiah Crawford, Alex Len. And the blue pennies, typically third team, Boogie Ellis, Colby Jones, Broderick Thomas, Terry Taylor, and Skal Labissière. So while you would rather have the guys out there, I do think it's pretty useful for figuring out, all right, who on this fringe of the roster are they going to keep around?
No, I'm with you on that. The opportunity has been there for some of these young guys to show what they can do. And like, we walked into practice today, and they let us see a little bit of 5-on-5. I think it was 40. I want to say it was 45 to 44 when we walked in and that was the second team that was up. And then they went up like 47 to 46. And then De'Aaron decided to just end this thing, and almost like in a brutal fashion. Like, he just kept stealing the ball from them and dunking it or putting it in the basket or taking them off the dribble. And next thing you know, it was like 54 to 47. The game was over. Mike went off on the players in front of us. Like, I mean, they were 50 feet away or 70 feet away, whatever it was. But he seemed to let some of the young guys have it for letting go of the rope late in the game. And then also let some of the veterans have it for not holding the young players accountable in those moments. But I kind of enjoyed what De'Aaron said, because De'Aaron was competing and wanted to win. And I kind of got he just kind of blew it off like, well, that guy wasn't on my team. Like, I thought, all right, he's on your team, but he's not on your team in that moment. And so I got where De'Aaron was kind of going with that. But I also understood Mike's point of view, where it's like, hey, look, everyone needs to be pulling the right way here, and we need to kind of stick together. Did you guys catch that little like back and forth?
Oh, there? Yeah. The thing I liked most about it is Mike really kind of showing that some of those turnovers that were seen in that scrimmage were really could be the difference in a series, and recognizing that it's not just a scrimmage or a potential game or even a preseason game, and not, tricking off a week's worth of training camp and the final scrimmage of this first week, and looking at the bigger picture and saying, you have to it really comes down to the details, and you have to really treat everything as if it is that Game 7 of an NBA Finals situation to a certain degree. And they've got their metaphor this year of that mountain, and Mike's going to probably harp on that a lot, to where Kings fans and even some players eventually, after hearing it for so long, may roll their eyes, but it is all for the greater good. It's getting these people to buy in to what they're trying to set out ahead of them for their journey ahead. So, I think it's something nice in camp to rally around and to have a belief in. But that's what accountability looks like. That's what he wants to see from other players, and that's why he went at Domas and DeRozan and Fox. And I agree with you, James. I like the moment where Fox was like, "Yeah, I was competing against the guy that turned it over. I'm not going to hold him accountable. I gotta dunk the ball.
I gotta go steal the ball and dunk it."
Yeah, and it was cool to see kind of some of that fire from Fox afterwards. Like, he dunks it, they win. I didn't, Brendan, I don't know if you caught it. I have to go back and listen to what he said. He kind of threw off something off of his hand, and it was almost like calling game, but I didn't hear exactly what he said.
I didn't hear exactly what he said. I'm pretty sure it was directed towards Malik, who was sitting right there talking, as usual. But I'm not at the point where I'm rolling my eyes at the climbing the mountain metaphor, but I do laugh every time Mike mentions it now. First day that he talked about it, he went on about a 7-minute rant about a guest speaker they brought in. Ed's last name starts with a V. I think we talked about it on the last pod a little bit, but his point and the attention to detail here in that metaphor is that if a climber were to miss a small detail, that could be detrimental down the line, and as he likes to point out, even lethal. And it's just about the process and the steps on the way there to eventually reaching that goal. And so, they got a big mountain ahead of them, but starting to climb it a little bit.
Yeah, today did kind of feel like Mike. He said, it's like clicking in the carabiner, and then he wasn't sure if that was the right word, and it was the right word. But it's almost like they're racing to the top, and there are two teams here, and De'Aaron watched like Mason Jones fall, and just, oh man, we're gonna race to the top now. So I don't know. I like the idea of the mountain climber thing, the theme. The shirt says Annapurna on the back, and I mean the whole build up that Mike has for why they chose this thing. I mean, it's interesting. Again, it's a tagline that we've seen the last couple of years. This team always has a shirt with a word or two on it, and I'm okay with it. But at the same time, it's just that, right? I like the initial season with Mike, where they had the poster and the all in, and everyone is signing their name to basically a contract saying, this is who we're going to be. We're going to buy in 100%. Nobody has got 1 foot out. Everyone has 2 feet in. And the new like mountain climbing, I get it. Again, I think if you're going to ascend in the Western Conference, it's going to be as a group, and it's going to be as a group where, somebody's going to get fame and fortune from it, and other guys who are helping, not as much, but maybe, behind the scenes just as much, they don't get the same sort of credit, but you're climbing as a group, and the goal is for everyone to make it to the top, not just a couple of stars at the top end of the roster. Sean, how are you with the mountain climbing metaphor that we've seen like all week?
I mean, I'm fine with it. I mean, every team is going to have something they rally behind, and it's some might call it corny, but you totally understand it, and it's you have to insert these little things that help take a whimsical, fun, and also you challenge people to think a little bit differently, right? And so I think guys do it in different ways. Different coaches have different approaches in the way that they do it. And I also think, it really depends on the group that you have. And I'll use Eric Musselman as an example. When Musselman took over for Rick Adelman, obviously he had a setback with a DUI, and it was kind of a rallying point for the team, and the team really had his back. But one of the things he did really early on, and you're going from a personality like Rick Adelman, who has a very veteran laden team and guys that kind of know the ins and outs of the NBA, and they had experienced a lot of success. and they were still a good team when Eric Musselman took over. They certainly weren't the best, but they had expectations to still win. And when Musselman took over, you would see decorated throughout the gym. It looked
Do we lose Sean?
very
He's back.
motivation speaker. Oh, sorry guys, I don't know where I cut out, but when Musselman took over, all throughout the gym in the practice facility, you would see these signs that were like inspirational and almost like rah kind of stuff you would see throughout high schools or even middle schools for that matter. And it seemed like it didn't go over well because that team was so veteran heavy and they knew what winning looked like to a degree. They knew what sustained playoff success looked like. And so it didn't sit well necessarily with that group. But if you have a younger team, that certainly plays a part, right? We've seen other coaches come in and use stuff like that, and it plays better. It's all it is just getting these guys to believe within each other, have a common goal, and strive for something. And however you introduce something year in, year out, it can take different shapes and different forms. And certainly there was nobody better at doing that than Phil Jackson. And he had some very strange ways of getting guys to buy in, but it's only strange if it doesn't work, right? If it works, whether they win or lose, that doesn't matter. It's all about the buy-in. If everybody buys in, and it doesn't matter what you do on the court, keeping the team together is ultimately the most important part for success. Doesn't mean you're going to have success, but that's what every coach is going to want to do. And I think things like this and what Mike has brought to the group, I feel like go over well with this group because you do have a relatively young group. You have a lot of guys that have just stepped into their prime, and you don't have that type of group that Eric Musselman had when he took over for Rick Adelman that was used to sustain playoff success.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen stacking days, right? That was why am I drawing a blank? Under Luke Walton, that was Rico Hines.
Yeah.
Right. And then it felt like that tagline very, very quickly became like stacking losses because that team wasn't very good and started to struggle. And that's what you don't want to see. And I think what we're always waiting for is that moment where the players start using the lingo and start talking about it in a way that means that it's sort of what's permeating through what they're doing, right? And like the all in, I just like it just felt like everyone brought it up all the time. Yeah, like we're all in. Like nobody's, we're all together here. We're all fighting the right fight. And I think the interesting thing about Mike's like sort of mantra this year is it makes a lot of sense. Like there is no way to climb the standings in the Western Conference unless you're doing it as a team. This team, like they have super great top end talent with Fox and Sabonis and DeMar DeRozan, and you can throw Keegan Murray and Malik Monk in there as like top tier talent as well. But at the same time, this isn't a team that has like Michael Jordan at the top. It's not one guy who's going to carry everybody to the finish line. And so I do think that like getting the buy-in for each other is a big deal. And like whatever metaphor you need to use to connect people, it's probably a good idea to try to do it at this point in the season and while you're building things. A couple of years ago under Mike, we saw like the longest practices of all time. We saw players running and going crazy in training camp. Do you guys feel, I'll start with Brenden here. Do you feel like maybe Mike is a little kinder, a little gentler, a little more in tune to his team now that they have all of their base sets and all that stuff with a couple of guys with a group of guys that have been here for a few years? Do you think we're going to see sort of a nicer Mike Brown like maybe we did last year, or are we going to see more of year one Mike Brown where this team is practicing 2 hours a day, like 6 days a week?
Yeah, I would probably say like last season, which I don't think was extremely different than his first year here. Definitely some slight variables kind of in the amount that they practiced, but forget who it was. Somebody else made a joke about how, that we're going to be practicing, no and Mike. So I would imagine that they will still get a lot of run and, in between games when they can, but NBA schedule makes it a little tough to be working in practices throughout the regular season when you have a week where you have 4 or 5 games in just 1 week. So I think can make it a little bit tough, and maybe that'll mean that some practices like DeMar sitting out of it for a bit, for certain portions and things like that, being one of the older guys. But I would still expect the same Mike Brown personally.
Yeah. Sean, you're shaking
Yeah,
your head.
that zebra doesn't change its stripes. I mean, he is going to, and I think part of it is if you want days off, earn them. Go out there and earn them. You're a team that, frankly, took a step back last year. Granted, it was only 2 games, but the world around you changed, so you have to be better. And that was the challenge of having to find ways to succeed with the expectation of winning. It was nice to have that first year where the goal was clearly playoffs, getting to the postseason. It's not, and you want to see that goal get stretched beyond. But as we've talked about, like it doesn't have to be a straight line for success, and you're going to experience things. So Mike Brown, until they get to a point of earning your days off, is as zebra ain't changing his stripes. I mean, he's gonna work this team, and I do agree with Brenden. Like you're gonna find ways to find guys rest, and I think overall, rest is still at the key of ultimately being a recipe for success, but you have to be sharp. The mistakes have to be there. You can't be missing free throws. Turnovers have to be down. You still have to play fast. There's a lot of complexities to what they do, but it's fun to listen to, De'Aaron Fox and DeMar DeRozan talk about the offense, and especially with someone like Debo who comes in here, and it's like the moment he gets it, like it's becomes very simple from an offensive standpoint. And especially for someone like him who has such an ISO mid-range type of game to him, how does that fit? And it all fits with spacing. And to me, watching him talk about it, he seems to like take to it like a fish to water. I mean, he's talking about loving the dribble handoff and the 2-man game with Domas, and he's talking about how that's damn near unguardable. So to hear that already after just being around the coaches and players really for a week in terms of what they can do on the floor for the opening of training camp versus these workouts that they've had in the weeks and months leading up to camp, is really encouraging to hear, because that I think is the biggest question mark for people outside of Sacramento. And I think a little bit for us too. We want to see how this all fits. We want to see how they can incorporate him. And is he going to be the same DeMar DeRozan that we've seen in other places, playing with a Ferrari like De'Aaron Fox and playing with a ultimate team guy in Sabonis, and in a offense that relies a lot on 3-point shooting. So some of those questions might be answered here in the days to come for sure.
Yeah, it's going to take a little while. I think it'd like to see how this thing functions and flows on the court. I want to see it. Like everyone wants to like ask for predictions and all that stuff. Like we'll do predictions like what we kind of feel like where the team is going to be. But we'll do that closer to the start of the season. When we know who's going to be available, when we know like how long Kevin Huerter is going to be out. And that's kind of where I want to lead the discussion next. Like if we had a position battle, I think that it was like very clear. It was at the shooting guard position. Keon Ellis is starting. Like he'll probably start the entire preseason because Kevin Huerter is not going to be able to go. And the more that we've talked to people and sort of more that we've talked to Kevin, it sure does feel like he's going to get cleared for full contact in mid-October, but he might not. Like there's going to be a ramp up, and he might be like more like 2 or 3 weeks after that. It doesn't seem to me like he's going to be ready 100% to open the season. Maybe I'm wrong, but is that the general vibe that you guys are getting as well?
Not for me. Like, I guess we'll find out what in the coming days here, because he's supposed to be cleared for contact. There's a reevaluation period, and they're hoping that he can get back into practices really this week. And we're talking about Kevin Huerter, obviously. So I would imagine if things go well, by the 3rd or 4th preseason test, you should probably be able to see Kevin Huerter back in the starting lineup, especially to try and see if his confidence is there, what that does for playing with that group of people. So I would, if everything goes well, I kind of expect that. I still expect him to be the starter at some point. I don't think that's going to change, but it will be interesting to see how it plays out. And it's all going to be, I think, his confidence, his health, his shot. I think those are the 3 things that are really going to play a factor.
Yeah, but he shouldn't be cleared next week. I mean, we're talking about mid-October. I mean, today's the 5th. If we're looking at another 10 days, I mean,
well, in terms of being able to reinstitute himself into contact, I mean, that's the first step. You have a full practice with contact before you can be, total handlebars off and training wheels off and you go full blast. But I think it should probably take its course that way.
Brenden, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that much. I mean, when they gave us the mid-October sort of reevaluation timeline, it's just pretty loose on what exactly that could mean. I think that he's been a little bit more involved than some of the other injured guys. I mean, naturally, he's what seems like further along in the process, like whether that just be, when they're running layup lines up and down the court, that Kevin's actually out there, even though we don't see him for the fives and the scrimmages and stuff, while Trey, Jordan maybe aren't quite doing that exact same thing. And getting individual work after on their end. But, there's going to be 5 preseason games in 8 days going from the 9th to the 17th. It'd be great if you could sneak them in for a little bit of that, but I wouldn't say that I'm expecting it currently until you see a little bit more of that 5-on-5, getting into game shape. And, he's a guy that's very big on rhythm just when it comes to his game. So can he get a little bit of a feel for just himself, his game within this offense that is still fairly much the same as what he's accustomed to and excelled in previously. So I don't know exactly where I'm expecting him to be back, but it does seem like maybe we could get the end of preseason for him. If not, that stretch from the 17th, where you have a week until the start of the regular season, and the 24th, you would hope during that time that he could get a little more reacclimated.
Today, DeMar DeRozan talked about Keon. And I thought it was interesting. He compared him to Alex Caruso. And to me, first of all, that's high praise. Alex Caruso is, one of the better defenders in the league. And he's a dirty work guy, right? And it does feel like Keon is quickly earning the trust of that starting group, whether that holds up for the first week of the season or the first month, or Kevin Huerter comes back and replaces him. Do you guys feel that too? It does seem like, whether it's Fox talking about him or DeMar DeRozan talking about him, they all talk about Keon with a very high esteem.
Yeah, I think the two guys you mentioned are what stood out to me this last week. DeMar had nice things to say today. You mentioned the Caruso comp, also said that's a guy that you like to play with. And it's not like he's just throwing Caruso out there. Like, he played with Caruso in Chicago, obviously. So I think that praise is warranted. They're even mentioning that he's shooting the ball really well, which obviously is important for the spacing of that group. So I think it stands out. It also, in that starting lineup, lets De'Aaron maybe not have to check the best guard on the other team to start games. So I think that Keon's going to make it really difficult for Kevin to eventually replace that spot when he comes back healthy, if that's the direction they decide to go. But I also see the pros of Kevin in that starting lineup for what it's worth. I feel like he kind of gets overlooked in a lot of this process because he spaces the floor extremely well. Mike mentioned it as well, but the pace that he has in the half court as well, just constantly sprinting through sets, I think is pretty valuable. So, it might make it hard for Kevin to just take that back from Keon. But ultimately, it's probably a good problem to have between having two, what I think are good options.
I liked Debo talking about him in the Caruso role, especially because of the way, Caruso's obviously longer, but the way he uses his length when he defends, and Keon does that very well as a guy who's 6'3". The way he defends using his body, the way Caruso does, it made a lot of sense. And yeah, you kind of see it. And I agree, James, it is high praise, but it also is warranted because stylistically, the way those two players defend, there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, and I think personally that's why I'm starting him, not just game one. I'm giving him a run, maybe the first 5 to 10 games, to see how the Kings do. And again, I'll keep saying this: the weird thing about this competition, if you want to look at it that way, is that Kevin Huerter can walk on the court and average 15 a game in his first week on the job, right? And I don't think Keon's ever going to be that guy who, he can score 15 in a game, and he will multiple times a season, but it's not what you're expecting. And so when I'm judging who Keon Ellis is to this team, I'm looking at defensive rating. I'm looking at the most important category that of all, which is the win-loss column. And that's how I'm going to judge the Keon Ellis experience. Now, if he's shooting 23% from three and he can't hit the broadside of the barn, he's averaging 3 points a game as your starter and you're struggling, then yeah, it's time to look at a change very quickly. But I don't think that that's what's going to happen here, just because that's not kind of who Keon was all last season. Just like a really high quality 3-point shooter, shot almost 42% from behind the arc. So I'm at least intrigued. I just find it interesting that sort of competition seems to have fizzled very quickly, and it just does feel like maybe it's Kevin Huerter's out of sight, out of mind. But it also, I think Keon Ellis is playing really well, and we'll have to see how it translates, on Wednesday when he's chasing around Steph Curry or whatever he's doing. But I definitely think that competition seems to be not nearly as I don't know, at the front of my mind as it was maybe a week ago before camp started. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alex Len is clearly the backup center at this point with Orlando Robinson. I mean, I don't think Orlando Robinson was moving past him as it was. But outside of that, what are you guys thinking about that 14th and 15th roster spot? Because, look, the Kings had no problems last summer. They had given Nerlens Noel $300,000 to show up to camp, and they gave Neemias Queta $250,000 to show up to camp. And 2 days before training camp, they waived them both and just ate the $550,000. If Orlando Robinson can't go, there is a possibility he just does not make this roster coming out of camp. If he doesn't, where are you guys at with this other group of players who, again, we keep talking about this, but who are getting plenty of opportunity to show who they are, because Trey Lyles is out, Kevin Huerter's out, Jordan McLaughlin is out, now Robinson, but also Devin Carter's out. So all of these young players who, whether it's Boogie Ellis or Terry Taylor or, Scowl, where do you guys think is going to happen with the 14th, 15th roster spot?
Yeah, I would still think that Orlando ends up keeping that spot. I think having a third string center, obviously important on the team if one of those two guys in front of them goes down. I would say that if that wasn't the case, then it's that's where Scal is kind of competing in my mind. And I would still definitely give Orlando the edge. But Terry Taylor seems to be the one that Mike Brown is talking fondly of pretty often. They're really big on offensive rebounds this year, rebounding on both ends of the ball. But he's always saying that Taylor is doing all of the little things, crashing the glass really well, playing with good energy. And we'll have to see sort of what the shot looks like, but he can play a little bit bigger. There were times he played the 4, ironically, next to Sabonis in Indiana as well. So he seems to be the one that stands out, and Boogie Ellis gets some good praise for similar things as well. So in my mind, I'm thinking Orlando for that 14th spot, and probably Terry Taylor for the 15th, with Boogie may be fighting for something there if they like what Mason Jones does. Sean mentioned earlier, could he promote from a 2-way, and could Boogie slide into that 2-way, for example? I don't think it's the most likely, because then who are you cutting from the 14 that seem to be pretty locked in? But I would probably say Orlando 14 and Terry Taylor for 15th.
Sean?
It's interesting how those, in the back end bigs, they all provide something different. Orlando obviously has the size, rim protection. He can stretch the floor a little bit. Scal has done a better job of stretching the floor, a little bit more familiar with at least the system that they're running. Long, runs the floor well. Not as mechanical as he used to be when he was here for the first few years of his NBA career. You can kind of see him thinking a lot less. Even Jalen, who's I think been talked about well, especially on the defensive end within this first week of camp. And obviously what Brenden talked about, it's funny to talk about Terry Taylor, a guy who's 6'4", and kind of think of him as it plays like a big player. But I don't feel like I'm there yet to where I could really give a full grasp, not only on what I think they might do, but what I might do. If I was Monty McNair and had to, or even, Mike Brown, and trying to put together who I want to make this team. And it feels like there's opportunity aplenty right now. And it's because of availability for some of these guys that are hurt. But as James mentioned, doing the Keita and Nerlens Noel, but also remembering that JaVale McGee was a late addition last year. They had already had those two guys squared away, and then they brought in McGee kind of late before camp. So and then, you know, also kind of thinking that there could be, based off of a week or two of camp, you might see somebody else get signed and brought in to give a look to somebody that might become available from other teams, or guys that might be interested in that haven't signed, that might come down on their price perhaps for a roster spot. So I think there's just all kinds of different options that could be out there, but through the first week, I don't know. I honestly don't know what they might do at this point. And I think that there's just a lot of camp and preseason that has to kind of go through, because like James, you mentioned him talking about Terry Taylor, or maybe, I'm sorry, Brenden, I think it was you, but we've also heard a lot about Isaac Jones, who is the Kings two-way player. And if you're a Kings fan who kept up with Summer League this past year, or this past summer, you know, that name, you saw some glimpses, some moments of real raw athleticism, and some others that was like, okay, that didn't look so great. And ultimately, still, I think is G League is where his bread is going to be buttered, especially for this first year. But if you're catching the eye of your coach as a two-way player coming in on a rookie season as a undrafted guy, like that's all you can ask for right now. So I think there's just a lot of little things that still have to happen before I could even answer that question, James. But I don't have a feeling one way or the other right now. I really don't.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I want to clear up something that John Pereira says here in the chat. I'll just pull it up. Jalen McDaniels can't be traded or waived until after the trade deadline. John, that's not correct at all. He can be traded today, but he can't be traded with another player until 60 days after his initial trade. I think we're 60 days out from that initial trade, which means he can be aggregated into a trade, and he can be waived anytime. Like, the Kings can waive any player. I mean, like, they can waive Domantas Sabonis tomorrow. They're gonna have to pay him, but like, you can waive a player without any problems at all. So just want to clear that up. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Jalen McDaniels will be on this team, and I think he might even be able to work his way into a rotation spot, at least for part of the season. But who knows? As far as who might make the team, I think Mason Jones is, again, a guy who put up just incredible stats at the G League level last year. And I wouldn't doubt that the Kings at least consider him for a regular roster spot, so they can open up a spot for Boogie Ellis. We've talked about this before, but Boogie Ellis is a rookie. And if the Kings waive him, he does not get allocated to the G League. He has to go through the G League draft because he hasn't been part of the draft process before. And that's the same thing with the other two-way players, with Isaiah Crawford and Isaac Jones. I swear every time I'm going to mix those two up, but I somehow don't. Both of those guys look like they've been here working out with the training staff, and they're both yoked and look much better than they did at Summer League. As far as, like, physically, they look better. But I do think, like, I'm intrigued with especially the Orlando Robinson injury. I was intrigued before because I wasn't sure that he was going to be able to make enough impact on this group in training camp. But I want to see if Scal can work his way into this group. And, again, Scal is a player who had a tremendous season last year at the G League level. At 28 years old, he averaged 1.7 blocks per game. The Kings don't have another shot blocker like that. And Orlando Robinson isn't that shot blocker either. And so I don't know that Scal's going to make it, but I at least have it would be interesting. It'd be a great story for sure. And it would be tenuous. But if you compare what he did at the G League level last year, and the fact that they used him in the Domantas Sabonis role last year, he can't do what Sabonis does, but he at least understands the offensive and defensive sets. And so, there is a possibility that you could actually put him out there for a little bit if you had an injury issue. And then on top of that, I think the Trey Lyles injury kind of opens another door there, because Scal, I think, can play the 4 and the 5. And maybe there's a potential there. But like we could be way off base here. We don't know enough right now, and see if Scal can actually be part of any conversation. But it would be a great story, and I'm pulling for him because he's a good kid, and we've known him forever. Like Sean and I have covered him since he was, what, 20 years old, I think. So
yeah, when he first came into the league, and yeah, what a feel good story that would be. Can you imagine if he makes the Kings team again like that? That'd be really great. I mean, just from a feel good story, and always looking from journalistically, that's what I love, is finding these little stories like that. Like that would be remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I mean,
if you don't know,
he was out of basketball. Like he wasn't going to continue.
totally. And if you guys don't know his story, go look his story up. It's incredible. It's like surviving the earthquakes in Haiti, and then really getting kind of like used by people here when he came in, to like make themselves famous, trying to get him into Kentucky and all that stuff. Like he's an amazing story of resiliency and everything else. So you always pull for him, especially he's just really, really a good kid off the court. And even like media day, like him coming over and like nothing but love between all of it. Like it's been a long time watching him kind of grow up, and it's always kind of cool. Even like with De'Aaron, it's cool. We talked about it on media day, how like, man, he was 19 years old when he came to Sacramento. He's just a baby. Now he's entering his 8th season. If he plays 72 games this season, he takes over as the all-time leader in games played in Sacramento Kings history. And like to have him go from like this spiky haired kid to the man that we see now with a wife and kids and everything else is just really, it's fun to kind of see that process play out. Brenden, you're getting used to training camps and stuff now, but is there anything that stands out to you that's different this year from the first couple of training camps, with your sort of the fresh eyes of Brenden Nunes?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything too new. I think that the like energy and belief that we talked about with DeMar being here is probably the main thing that stands out. That just his presence, the fact that there's another bona fide star on this team. I think you definitely feel the difference there a little bit. I keep waiting and kind of being curious how much we're going to see his voice matter on and off the court, and what that could look like, just his leadership style. Like when, Mike Brown saying today, as you mentioned, that you need one of the veteran dudes, one of the guys that are sort of the multiple heads of the snake, the big three, whatever you want to call it, to kind of talk up and say something to help out some of these other guys. Like I wonder if we heard that a lot in years prior. Is DeMar hearing that going to, maybe resonate a little bit more? Is he actually going to start speaking up a bit more? So kind of curious to see how a lot of these things with DeMar are going to go. But for the most part, doesn't feel all too unique or different than some of the other ones. What about for you guys?
Yeah, Sean?
No, I don't think they necessarily feel any different per se. I'll say I think I just can't help. I think I'm just like everybody else when I get into the gym each time to watch this team. My eyes just gravitate right to DeMar DeRozan. Today it was easy for me not to do that because he was on the bench when we saw the scrimmage going on, and I still was looking at him. But Fox looks incredibly as he should, confident, healthy. Looks like there's a bounce to him right now. He's vocal right now, I think, which is helpful. But yeah, I mean, I just every time I get into that facility, my eye gets kind of captivated by what DeRozan's doing because it looks so different, and I think that's going to be like that for a while. I know I'm not the only one, and obviously, as someone points out in the chat, that's my second favorite thing is Malik Monk and Mike Brown. It's a playful thing. I don't want anybody to think that it's like some serious thing. I was seeing some mentions the other day after finally seeing the back and forth that they had on the court. But as he puts it, he says, no one else, I hold the coaches accountable. They hold us accountable. Mike loves it. He loves the back and forth. It's kind of a a playful thing that's happened, and it's evolving every single day. And yeah, Malika's vibes for sure.
Yeah, that is the other like storyline of camp is the sort of cat and mouse game between Mike Brown and Malik Monk, where Monk just keeps getting a hold of the practice schedule and then calling Mike out for running practice late. So I think it's fun, and I think we've all had a good time with it. I also think like there's a couple of things that Malik has said this already during preseason, during training camp here, whether it's media day or we got him was it Wednesday we got Malik, something like that. I just think it's like I don't want to people need to know how much that the Sacramento allure and sort of him finding himself as a player like means to Malik Monk, because I think like instantly you want to think that Malik Monk was going to chase like the most money possible, because he kind of gives you that vibe that like, oh, he's a player who needs to get paid. He didn't say those words, but you could feel he's a player who feels like he hasn't really been respected as much as maybe he should, and that he was going to get his big payday and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I feel like we keep kind of getting these little bits of him where you can feel that the draw of being here in Sacramento, the draw of finding an NBA home, the draw of Mike Brown and Monty and Wes and Vivek he talked about, like getting him here, but then allowing him to grow into who he is as a person and as a player, and to really like find his voice and everything as a player. I think he understands how difficult that is in the league to find, and how hundreds of players never get that opportunity to actually find their place in the world in the NBA. And I think he really, really cherishes what's happened here. And so that's the one other thing that I kind of took away from early in camp, just like almost like it's such a feel good story for Malik as a guy who felt like he was almost out of the league, who had to take a league minimum deal to play for the Lakers, and was like close to being out of the league in his mind. And now here he is on a really, really good contract, but more realistic, he's on a really good contract in a really, really good place for him as a basketball player and as a person. And so kind of a cool story that you don't usually get here in Sacramento, of someone finding themselves and this being the right place. Because I think for a lot of players throughout my like going on 15 years now, this has been the wrong place for so many players. And to have a player like have it be the right place and the right time is really kind of cool for me. So I don't know if you guys have felt that.
Yeah, definitely. I actually like what Jay mentioned. He's talking about what Malik talked about on media day, and you were alluding to this too. But the comment where he talked about closing the door on some like problems and issues and things that have challenges that he's experienced, and having his mind open for other challenges ahead, replacing those challenges with new challenges. Like insightful and kind of an enlightened way of thinking about his journey and what lies ahead. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a great story, and good for him. I mean, it's all these life moments that happen for some of these guys, and it happens at the right time. I mean, you mentioned Fox. I mean, we've seen him go from a kid to this, grown-ass man who's a father.
Grown-ass man.
Yeah, I mean, he's and now he not only is, he's got help around him, he's still the face of his organization, and everything has kind of been charted this way, but he's followed that path, and it's led to success, and he's ready now to have a whole lot of team success to go along with it. So I think Malik falls into that category, and he knows it's funny, he knows that he took a sweetheart of a deal to stay here because of the right situation and what's around him. Also knowing, as he pointed out to me over the summer, it's like they're going to owe me. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get on the back end. So that's how he feels. That's how he thinks about his situation.
I think another aspect of it too is just like the fan base really embracing him. I think that you saw that a little bit with the Lakers, but obviously a more temporary situation. And when he got asked how much love he gets around the city after signing the deal, his response is, it's been like that since I got here, really. So I think that that's another aspect of just, finding your NBA home. Like you're saying, it goes beyond just players, coaches, and all that stuff. But I think the city really embraced him as well and probably plays into that.
Yeah, I think so too. We heard that from
Would you
Alex
say-
Len this week too. Go ahead.
Do you think? I mean, it's not a stretch. I mean, to me, he is the fan favorite, right? Like, I think Keegan gets a little bit of that. Fox certainly does, but I think Malik is the fan favorite.
Yeah, like I think I'm just gonna. He's the Bobby Jackson of this group. Yeah, I mean, and like again, Bobby Jackson was probably the 5th, 6th best player on the Kings' great teams, but he was the guy that fans adored. Like just absolutely. I mean, you remember he had his own like Subway doll. Like Bobby Jackson, like he was a big deal.
Was it
And
Subway? Was it Subway?
Yeah, he had a Subway doll. I think I
That's
have one. Like
hilarious.
he has like
Yeah,
a
I remember
little.
it.
It's a little plush toy. There's a Scott Pollard one too, and
Right.
Scott was right there with him as far as like popular players. But I think Bobby, like people
Bobby's
are
so much more impactful, though. I mean,
Yeah,
6th man of the year. Yeah.
yeah, people are naturally drawn to players and personalities like that. Flashy players, guys who got they have big smiles and big personalities, and so yeah, I think he is probably the fan favorite. But I also think this is like by far the most likable team that we've ever had in Sacramento, like from top to bottom, at least during my time. Like the early 2000 Kings, like, yeah, a bunch of likable guys, was Jason Williams or Doug Christie or Peja Vlade, Weber, like a lot of likable dudes. But this one here, it just feels like there's not a bad guy in the group, and all of them have like their like introspective moments with us where you just like, this is a cool dude. I think more than like almost any team I've ever covered, like authentic and real for the most part, like from top to bottom. Sweet. Well, we're not gonna do this all day. It's Saturday. You guys need to get out and enjoy this weather. And Sean and Brenden need to get out and enjoy this weather as well. What do you guys got for final thoughts?
Sean always loves when I do this. I don't really have anything. I
Damn,
currently pulled up the Warriors and Clippers on my other screen here, and I
From
just
Hawaii.
constantly, yeah, I know, a little jealous of that.
Yeah.
Constantly thinking about how I just don't think this Warriors team is very good this year. Like it's really Steph Curry, and then after that, what in the world is going to happen? Maybe Kuminga takes another jump or something, but yeah, I'm interested to see how the Western Conference ends up shaking out, because there's going to be a team or two that we think's in this competitive tier, which is really 13 teams. If you want to say Portland and Utah are the two that are not, and even Utah is like sneaky competitive for half a season every year, it feels like. But there will be one or two that I think will separate themselves as a little bit lower, and maybe it's Golden State.
Yeah, I
I'm trying
want
to figure out what their starters would be. That's a tough game to play.
Their entire team is
Curry, Melton, Kuminga, Draymond, and Trace Jackson Davis.
I agree with you. I would start Trace Jackson Davis for sure. I think it's I don't know that I would lean Melton though. I don't know if
Buckets.
Maybe Buddy.
Podziemski. They're going to start
Podziemski. But
right?
I kind of think Podziemski and Curry might be the answer there.
Yeah,
I know we were looking at it the other day. Kyle and I had this discussion, and we're going through everybody. I think like there's so few teams that you can see taking major steps back. Like I don't think Minnesota's going to win 57 games again. So let's just take 4 wins there and like allocate them to someone else, right? Like I still think that they're a 50+ win team, but the Warriors are the one team, and then the Clippers. Clippers won 50 last year. I could see the Clippers winning 44 this year. And then I look at the Warriors, who won 44 last year. I could easily see them winning 8 fewer games, and it's because
8?
Memphis. Yeah, because like look, Memphis is going to beat somebody, and the Rockets are going to be better, and they're going to beat somebody, and those wins have to come from somewhere. And I don't think they're coming from a team like the Kings. I don't think they're coming from Phoenix. I don't think they're coming from Dallas, who won about what you expected last year. I don't think OKC is going to lose a bunch more games than they did last year. What they win 57, 58. That's who they are in my book. So where are those wins coming, especially from the West? I mean, the East is a hot mess. Like there are 6 teams that are just ass and will give up some of those wins. But in order for some of these teams to ascend, like a Houston, like again, San Antonio is going to win. Let's say San Antonio won 22 games last year. Would anyone be surprised if they won 32 this year?
Or
No?
more?
Yeah, I can see it.
So let's say 5 of
more.
those wins come from the Eastern Conference, but another 5 have to come from the West. So like somebody's going to lose in the West, and I know it's weird, but like I just don't like the way that the Warriors are constructed. So I mean, again, if your bench unit is Buddy Hield at the 2 and Kyle Anderson at the 3, like are there 2 more diametrically opposed players in the league that move at a different pace and like won't look good together on the court? I don't know.
Well, I'll
We'll
say
see.
this. I mean, to me, like of all the teams in the West, I put the Warriors at probably the top of the list of teams that I feel will make a pretty significant move within the first month or 2 of the season. And so like they just have so many pieces that are random and movable and I think enticing to others. So let's pretend that becomes, I don't know, a Zach LaVine or a Jimmy Butler or something. Like I'm just throwing names out there at this point, but if any of those 2 end up in on Golden State, you're going to think about that team a lot differently.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I also look and like, I mean, I expect the Kings to win 4 more games than they did last year, and I don't know well, they can get those wins by beating Detroit and Charlotte and Washington and Portland like they didn't beat them last year in matchups. But I also think that there are teams in the West that are in for a rough season. I'd say the Lakers. I'll put the Lakers in that group as well. That could.
Portland just took a hit, man. I mean, Shaden Sharp in that shoulder. That's a bad injury.
Yep. Yeah, he's out. What they say, 4 to 6 weeks at a minimum, and it's a slight tear of the labrum, which means that eventually he's going to have surgery. It's just a matter of when.
It could be problematic for the rest of the season.
It could be problematic for the rest of his career. So yeah, and it's not his first injury like this. He's already like proven to be injury prone, and that team, I think, like look, they're bad, and I think they'll be equally as bad this next year. But
their roster makes no sense. They have Ayton, Robert Williams, just drafted Donovan Clingan. They have a random mass roster. They got to be bottom of the West.
They do have some interesting pieces though. Like if you look at that team, I think like if they were to put a yard sale sign up, that like I think there would be a bunch of teams like, hey, I'd take Robert Williams on a flyer, or I don't think anyone's going to jump at the opportunity to take on Jeremy Grant's contract, but they have Matisse Thybulle hiding there. They've got the other Murray twin. They traded for Danny Avdija. Yeah, that team is weird. All kinds of talent, but none of it makes any sense. And then I'll make this claim outside of the Boston Celtics, from like 1 to 14, I think the Houston Rockets are probably the most talented team in the NBA, just like talent wise, outside of the Rockets.
Ooh, that is a take.
Outside of Boston. Look at their roster from top to bottom.
They do have like 8, 9 guys that are kind of crazy.
Top 5 picks. Like,
but most talented?
Yeah, they're not going to. I don't think they're going to win like that right now. But like by 2-3 years from now, look at those players from top to bottom. I mean, I'm just saying. Yeah,
I'm high on their future. Don't get me wrong. Very, very high on their future. But I just don't think I could call that the most talent. But I see you working.
I'm just saying, look at that team. I mean, OKC is right there.
I mean, OKC is phenomenal. I think.
But they're 2 years ahead. That's why.
Well, they're 2 years ahead, but they've got all their picks. They might have 2 legit superstars. They certainly have an MVP candidate, and they're probably going to finish number 1 in the West. So
no, I think they're finishing number 1 in the West, but long term, man.
Long term, they're great. I mean, like,
yeah.
What's the long term? They're phenomenal.
But so is Houston.
Yeah, but the difference is OKC's doing it now.
Yes. No, I
Yeah.
get you. I'm what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that like wait 2 years and see where this team is. Because we haven't even seen like any of the potential of what is it, Amin Thompson that's there. They've got Cam Whitmore hiding. They've got Şengün and Steven Adams backing him up. Like that team is so stacked, like from top to bottom. Tari Eason,
Cam Whitmore,
yeah. I mean,
Jalen Green.
Jabari Smith Jr.,
Yep.
Jalen Green, Shepard.
And for Şengün and Jalen Green, they didn't offer the extension or the options to, right?
It hasn't happened yet, but yeah, they'll probably get their deals.
No, I think they declined it. I think they.
Oh,
someone in the
no,
chat
they
probably
have
knows.
until October 31st, if I'm not mistaken.
But I think they've already. Maybe I'll look it up here real quick.
They didn't decline their 4th-year options as players. They might not have given them rookie scale extensions. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
Dude, that they have.
But I mean, they're
so
going to
much
try to
depth.
get a long-term deal with Şengün, obviously, but maybe not with Green.
We'll see. That team is just stacked, and it's a bunch of top, 5, 10 picks, in the draft, and a lot of the guys haven't even like hit their even like their potential, the bottom end of their potential yet. So I'm intrigued. All right, let's see, Sean. Final thoughts.
Awesome to spend last night in El Dorado Hills to see three of the coaching staff members checking out Folsom and Oak Ridge. Mike is obviously just a regular on the sidelines. He lives right around the corner, but he's got a tie to Oak Ridge. He hadn't seen Folsom play yet, and Folsom took care of business. That game was a 14-7 game at the half, and then they rattled off. They outscored Oak Ridge 21-0 in the second half. So, yeah, just incredible talent all over the field. I mean, Oak Ridge has a kid going to Alabama, Ryder Lyons, as someone just pointed out in the chat here. He's recruited by Alabama. They got another kid going to Texas. It's just, you've got D1 players everywhere, and a lot of fun. And that's a huge rivalry. That's 22 straight that Folsom has won over Oak Ridge. Mike was there. Luke Laux was out there. He was there super early, and so was Jim Moran. So really cool to see those guys, in the community. Mike's been on the sidelines of Grant last week, getting kind of a taste of Del Paso Heights and the atmosphere of the games out there. So just really cool. And we've seen it throughout the years. We've seen, the likes of De'Aaron Fox, DeMarcus Cousins, guys come in and want to take an active approach and go and check out some Friday Night Lights. And that was a lot of fun to see those guys out there. So
very cool. Let's see, final thoughts from me. I don't think I have much either. I was sick last week. That wiped me out. Feeling better. Everything's kind of back to normal. We're in the grind. It's been a little wild, like going from one place to the next all week long. But I think it's been a really fun training camp so far. I think it's a good group of guys, and it's been relatively smooth. Everything's gone pretty smooth so far. A little concerned about all the injuries. A little bit concerned about what the starters look like going up against other NBA starters, because I don't know, like the level of competition at camp to me is still a little light, but still good stuff going on there. Let's see. You guys, Spencer, thanks for mentioning that I did have I sang Journey last night at a work function.
I'm just glad that none of my karaoke exploits have hit the social media, because
I didn't know it had hit social media until I got to practice today.
I think your facial expressions are what did it for me. Like you got into character.
Hand movement while he was going.
Hand movement, of course.
Sweet, there it is. Anyway, yeah, we had a work function at our studio last night, and everyone was drinking and having a good time. And
Journey your go-to? Is that
No, that wouldn't have been my go-to, but it was the first song that I knew. So, and I had sat there for an hour and a half. So I now feel obliged to put video of Damian Barling singing.
Oh, yeah. The world needs it.
Kenny Caraway singing. But we'll see.
Do you know what the songs were?
No, because I don't. Yeah, I've heard the songs like once or twice at a wedding or like at a nightclub somewhere, but like overall, no, it wasn't my genre of music. Although we did have complex on the DJ doing DJ sets, who is like a very, very, very well known DJ who runs 2 of our stations, but flies all over the place and still is a high end DJ everywhere. So
Cool.
Anyway, cool. All right, I think that does it. You guys go out and have a good Saturday night. Thanks for dropping in and hanging out with us here on the KINGSBEAT podcast. Make sure to give us a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Jump on board to the KINGSBEAT. Go to thekingsbeat.com. Become a premium subscriber. All that stuff. We've got more content coming. It's been a deluge of content all week, and we'll have even more. Make sure to go find all of Sean's work at Fox 40. Find Brendan's work where Brenden works. And like, so you can find it out there. You can find it out there, and that's where it will be. And make sure that you're supporting Brenden and what he does, because he's doing a really good job at the place that he works. All right. So for Fox 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Bulls podcast, I am James Ham. You guys be good. Have a good week. See you very soon. Couple of podcasts on the way.